Welcome to my video lecture series in Game Concept and Production. This is Professor Janus Raymond Tan from the College of Computing and Engineering. For this video lecture, we will cover the topics about game design, iteration, and rapid prototyping. Throughout this video, we will discuss all about what is a game design, what is a game designer, how is a game design, and iteration and risk. Game design is an exciting, rewarding, and multifaceted field with promising job prospects. However, becoming a game designer can be a challenging journey. Game design sits under the broader field of video game development and refers to the use of creativity and design to develop a game for entertainment or educational purposes. It involves creating compelling stories, characters, goals, rules, and challenges that drive interactions with other characters, users, or objects. It is creation of the rules and content of a game, meaning you're just defining the boundaries of the game, the do's and the don'ts, what is acceptable or not. It does not involve programming, art or animation, or marketing, or any of the other myriad tasks required to make the game. And all of these tasks collectively can be called game development, and game design is just one part of development. It refers to the idea behind the game, but it's come to mean a whole lot more than that. In large immersive games, game design refers to the central theme or point, as well as the story and plot and the characters' backstories. In smaller games and in games in which there are no significant characters or plot, for example in a racing game, game design refers to how one plays the game. What are the rules? How the game is scored? How does the level of difficulty change with play? What makes the game fun or challenging? Video game design is the process of conceiving, planning, and directing the creation of an electronic game in which players control images on an electronic display. Video game demands a strong background in logic as well as working knowledge of game theory and human psychology. So there are many tasks associated with game design, which is the system design, level design, content design, user interface design, world building, and story writing. Throughout the lesson, we will touch lightly on UI, story writing, and content when relevant, but the majority of this lesson focuses on system design, also sometimes called systems design or core systems design. System design is about defining the basic rules of the game. It is about answering the questions like, what are the pieces? What can you control? What actions can you take on your turn, if there are turns at all? What happens when you take each action, and how does it affect the game state? In general, system design is the creation of three things. First, the rules for setup. How does the game begin? Second, the rules for progression of play. Once the game begins, what can the players do and what happens when they do things? Number 3, rules for resolution. What, if anything, causes the game to end? If the game has an outcome, such as winning or losing, how is that outcome determined? Now, what is a game designer? A game designer designs characters, levels, puzzles, art, and animation. They may also write code using various computer programming languages. Depending on their career duties, they may also be responsible for project management tasks and testing early versions of video games. They also craft the core mechanics of the game. This means that they are responsible for deciding how games work when the player starts playing them. Most importantly, game designers create rules. These rules govern how games work. Even for non-digital games like board and card games, we cannot play those games without following a rule set. These rules of games guide how players achieve goals. Often, goals and rules are tied to more complex procedures that altogether generate the content of gameplay. A game designer can also be involved in creating the narrative structure. In example, the drama and story that players experience in a game of a game. Depending on the size of the development of the team, game designers can also be involved in creating the narrative structure. Game designers are often the creative hub of game development. They help the game development team communicate and ensure that the vision of the gameplay experience is maintained throughout all developmental iterations of the game. They help the artists and programmers in the team share a vision when they are not sharing a common vocabulary. This is also partially why game development is such an exciting profession to be working in because highly technical and highly creative people work together on creating something very unique, which is a video game. Now, what are the qualities of a game designer? Game designers are artists. The term art is just as difficult to define as the word game. But if games can be a form of art, then designers would be artists. Game designers are architects. Architects do not build physical structures, they create blueprints or plans. Video game designers also create blueprints, which are referred to as design docs. Board game designers create blueprints as well in the form of prototypes, which are then mass produced by publishers. Designers are party hosts. They invite players into our space and they try their best to show them a good time. Game designers are research scientists. They create games in a manner that is very close to the scientific method. Game designers are gods. They create worlds and they create the physical rules that govern those worlds. Game designers are lawyers. They create a set of rules that others must follow. Game designers are educators in accordance with the theory of fun. Entertainment and education are strongly linked, and games are fun because they involve learning new skills. Now, what are the responsibilities of a game designer? A game designer is the creative driver responsible for bringing a game to life. They are generally a cross between a writer, artist, and a programmer. Besides technical skills, you must also be an excellent storyteller with some level of artistic ability. While the job varies depending on the size of the studio, responsibilities may include developing the storyline, character backstories and dialogue, developing gameplay, rules and the scoring system, determining the level of difficulty, building interfaces and environments, level and world design, programming and scripting, digital editing, image rendering, and testing. You also need to be a great communicator who can clearly convey a story or message that engages your players and motivates them to take action. You must know how to express simple ideas, convince people of your ideas, and give and take feedback. An understanding of marketing will also help you excel in this role. Now, how is a game designed? Historically, the first design methodology was known as the waterfall method. First, you design the entire game on paper, then you implement it, either using programming in a video game or creating the board and pieces for a non-digital game. Then you test it to make sure the rules work properly, add some graphical polish to make it look nice, and then you ship it. Waterfall is so named because, like water in the waterfall, you can only move in one direction. If you're busy making the final art for the game and it occurs to you that one of the rules needs to change too bad, the methodology does not include a way to go back to design step once you are done. At some point, someone figured out that it might be a good idea to at least have the option of going back and fixing things in earlier steps, and created what is sometimes known as the iterative approach. As with Waterfall, you first design the game, then implement it, and then make sure it works. But after you add an extra step of evaluating the game, play it, decide what is good and what needs to change, and then make a decision. Are you done, or you should go back to the design step and make some changes? If you decide the game is good enough, then that is that. But if you identify some changes, you now go back to the design step, find ways to address the identified problems, implement those changes, and then evaluate again. Continue doing this until the game is ready. The figure shows the iterative approach in game development. Now, if this looks familiar, it is because this is more or less the scientific method. Why? You make an observation, you make a hypothesis, you create an experiment to prove or disprove the hypothesis, perform the experiment, and interpret the results of the experiment, forming a new set of observations. Go back to the first step. With non-digital card or board games, this process works fine because it can be done quickly. With video games, there's still one problem, which is the implementation. Implementation, in example, we need programming and debugging. It is expensive and takes a long time. If it takes 18 months to code the game, the first time you only have 2 years, you will not get a lot of time to playtest and modify the game. In general, the more times you iterate, the better your final game will be. Therefore, any game design process should involve iterating. That is, going through an entire cycle of designing, implementing, and evaluating as much as possible, and anything you can do that lets you iterate faster will usually lead to a better game in the end. Because of this, video game designers will often prototype on paper first, and they only get the programmers involved when they are confident that the core rules are fun. We call this rapid prototyping. Now let's talk about the iteration and risk. Games have many kinds of risk associated with them. There is design risk, which is the risk that the game will not be fun and people won't like it. There is implementation risk, the possibility that the development team will not be able to build the game at all, even the rules are solid. There is market risk, the chance that the game will be wonderful and no one will buy it anyway. The purpose of iteration is to lower design risk. The more times you iterate, the more you can be certain that the rules of your game are effective. This all comes down to one important point. The greater design risk of your game, that is, if your rules are untested and unproven, the more you need iteration. An iterative method is not as critical for games where the mechanics are largely lifted from another successful game. Sequels and expansion sets to popular games are examples of situations where a waterfall approach may work fine. That said, most game designers have aspirations of making games that are new, creative, and innovative. In summary, we could say that a game sits under the broader field of video game development and refers to the use of creativity in design to develop a game for entertainment or educational purposes. Game design involves creating compelling stories, characters, goals, rules, and challenges that drive interactions with other characters, users, or objects. In designing a game, the more times you iterate, the better your final game will be. For this lesson's activity, considering the traditional rock, paper, and scissors game, identify the rules for setup, rules for progression of play, and rules for resolution. Type your answers in a Word document. Use the given table format to organize your answer. That's it for now. Thank you for watching and hope you enjoyed this video. For inquiries, feel free to post your questions in our group chat. In our next video, we will discuss all about the formal elements of games. Don't forget to visit the links in the references section for more information about this lesson. See you in the next video.